Good afternoon. My name is Salam Saloom. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the Qatar Biomedical Research Institute, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this special webinar, the first in 2021. As always, in this webinar series, we explore valuable tips, lessons, and unique career stories to inspire early career researchers. If you missed our previous webinars, you could watch a recording on the HPKU YouTube channel. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. The microphone of all attendees has been muted, but we encourage you to post all your questions during the talk in the Q&A tab, not in the chat tab, as you can see in the following slides. Please direct these questions to all panelists to make sure that your questions are visible to us. This webinar is being recorded, and the link will be shared with you within a couple of days. Today, we have a very exciting topic entitled Non-Linear Career Paths, Lessons Learned on Resourcefulness and Grit. Sometimes we think that career paths are just this straight and linear, but this is rare. Probably the majority of us are following what has been described as non-linear career paths. But what does it mean? What our speaker will discuss today is how career paths can take unexpected turns when life happens, her career story, and proven strategies to succeed against all challenges. With this, I'm very pleased to welcome our guest speaker who joined us from Rhode Island in the US, Ms. Enith Morillo. She has a Master and Bachelor of Science in Electrical and Biomedical Engineering from Western Polytechnic Institute. She is currently the President and Principal Consultant at Cadorate Global, LLC, a quality and compliance consulting company specializing in supporting emerging, virtual, and early-stage small pharmaceuticals around the globe to take their drug candidates into clinical studies. Before founding Cadorate Global, Enith worked as a quality consultant and auditor, also as an analytical scientist at the Thermo Fisher Scientific site. She is a passionate supporter of women and minorities in STEM careers, and she enjoys mentoring young professionals. Enith, bienvenida, welcome. We are indeed excited to host you today. I'm really curious to hear about your career story, so let's begin. I'll hand over to you for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Salam, for the introduction. Let's share my slides. Can you see my screen?
It's perfect.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Thank you to the QBRI team for extending this introduction or this opportunity to me. And thank you, Dr. Salam, for the introduction. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share my career story and the lessons that I have learned along the way. Needless to say, I am very nervous. I'm not a public speaker and don't enjoy it. But I do believe that there are some lessons that I have learned throughout my career that can benefit others. And this is why I put myself out there and tell my story. Just want to give you kind of an overview as to what I'll be talking about. You know, I'll tell you a little bit about my background and where I came from or where I come from, my education, how my career progressed. As Dr. Salam said, you know, I founded and now the president of my own company, Cadorate Global, and you know, some of the lessons learned, and then we'll open it up for questions. So background. And I'm not sure that, can you guys see this? Is there a way to close it? There we go. So I'm originally from Venezuela, which is in South America. And for those of you who don't know anything about the country, we were at one point one of the top oil producers in the world. We are known for our Miss Venezuela beauty contests, participants that have won Miss Universe and Miss World for many years. And we also have the tallest waterfalls in the world, Angel Falls. Now, personally, I come from a family of non-college graduates. My mom went to university for a couple of years, but didn't finish her degree. And my father had, I believe, up to middle school education. So neither of them, and neither, a lot of people within the extended family graduated from college. However, even with very modest education, my father was the first authorized service provider for Sony in our city, Maracaibo. And so from early on, I was exposed to, electronics in my life. It was a family owned business. And so I would spend a lot of time at my dad's business. And, he would, taught me soldering from a young age. He would literally give me the boards to take out all of the electrical components and taught me what they were and how to read, resistors and the different, color lines. And so from early on, I was exposed to, engineering, so to speak, and electronics. I come from my mother's side, I'm an only child, but from my father's side, I have 4 siblings, 3 brothers and 1 sister. 2 of my brothers were, the older ones were also into electronics. And so it was sort of a family thing, right? We all played around with the equipment and got our hands, into it. So, fast forward to my high school education, I went to a private school in Venezuela, and I lived in Venezuela until I was about 15 years old. But in my senior year of high school, I had the opportunity to do a project for graduation. And this project really introduced me to project-based education. I had an interest already into electronics and biomedical engineering. And the project that I chose was actually on the first MRI machine that was available at one of the hospitals in Maracaibo. And, it was super interesting in which this MRI machine had to have a building, a separate building outside of the hospital constructed, around it because of the magnetic fields. A lot of the information, about the machine and how, it worked was in English. And so we literally, and there was no Google Translate at the time. And so we literally had to translate, with the dictionary, English, Spanish, some of the information to be able to complete this project, and talked to the pioneers that brought the machine to Venezuela. And, so it was really interesting and sort of set the stage for what I wanted to do. During my junior year in high school, I also applied for a Galileo Leadership Scholar Program, which was founded by the Venezuelan government and an organization called Fundayacucho. And, there were about 12,000 participants within the country. It was a program that took, students within Venezuela and provided them with the opportunity to go to another country and study, pursue their college education elsewhere with a full scholarship. And so from about 12,000 participants, they selected about 250, and I was, really blessed to be one of them. And, part of that journey helped me to become the first college graduate in my family. And not only that, but, learn a new language and adjust to a new culture, I had chosen different countries, but, ended up in the US because you had the ability to select between 3 different countries, your top 3 choices. But I ended up going to the US, and, it was a very life-changing experience. Part of this is, I'm very grateful to my parents who recognized that this was a life-changing opportunity. And even though, as I said, being an only child from my mother's side, they encouraged me to, go by, and try it out. And if you don't like it or you don't think you can make it, you can always come back. But if you don't go, then you'll never know. And I'm very grateful that they encouraged me to come. So I came to the US, and as Dr. Salam said, I pursued a degree in electrical engineering. When I went to WPI, they didn't have biomedical engineering as undergraduates. And so you had to select between chemical, electrical, or mechanical engineering to do sort of a minor in biomed. So, for me, it was a no-brainer. I chose electrical because of my keen interest in electronics. And then when I went for graduate school, and this wasn't covered through the scholarship, I had the opportunity to either do a master's in biomedical engineering or work through my master's program by doing a research and a teaching assistantship, but through the electrical engineering department. And so to me, it was important, to be able not to, get into debt. My family came, from humble resources. They couldn't pay for my schooling. And so I decided to do the master's in electrical engineering, yet again, focusing on biomedical engineering on the side and, for my master's project. One of the things that I'd like to take a pause here when talking about education is the ability to focus and unfocus. And I have here, a picture of a horse with, with the blinders, because I feel that personally, I went to school with a very focused, and narrow agenda. I was there to become an engineer. I was there to pursue engineering studies, and that's all I did. And I pretty much went through both my undergrad and graduate studies with blinders on, focused and, focusing on my objective. But I didn't really give myself the opportunity to explore other disciplines, even though I had interests such as, fencing and chess club and theater. I really didn't, make the time to pursue those other extracurricular activities. And I found that in college, this is really the time to do such things and build on some of those hobbies and interests. So I would say, make sure that you are not too focused and take the time to explore other things. Take advantage of student groups if they are, available in your university, and build a foundation, a broad foundation for yourself, and that is not only focused on the one thing that you're there to do. So I graduated when I was 22 with a master's, and at the time I had just gotten married. I was expecting my first child. And I was faced with a very tough decision to make. I had a student visa that was expiring, and I had to either, find a job, within a certain time period, or I had to leave the country. And, unfortunately for me, I didn't see that there were opportunities for me in my country. And so I decided to overstay my visa. And that presented me with a challenge because I couldn't, work legally and pursue. Now I had, just spent 6 years of my life, getting this engineering degree, but I couldn't work. And so, it was heart-wrenching, so to speak. And during that time, I explored different opportunities. I said, well, maybe I can go to Canada and do a doctorate. And so I applied to graduate school to do a doctorate in Canada. Unfortunately, my visa was denied. And so I wasn't able to take, that advantage of that opportunity. Similarly, I applied for a doctorate program in Australia. Similar issue, occurred. I had some, family challenges. And then, I ended up in Syria, and, not ideal because, again, I was in another culture, in a different language, and, you make the most out of it. Part of that, what I call my career break, it was about 9 years that I wasn't, from the time I graduated to the time that I started, in the industry, it was about 9 years. But I didn't give up. I did all kinds of work, or jobs, just to keep myself busy and occupied. I was a teacher for a few years. I taught math and science for middle school students and computer science. And, I'm happy to share that some of the students are now graduated, married with children, and we still keep a relationship. I worked at a coffee shop. I worked as a pizza delivery driver. I volunteer for STEM programs, teaching girls, about electronics and introducing them to STEM careers. I worked at a manufacturer that made adhesives and learned about epoxy and their applications. And so all throughout, even though I wasn't working as an engineer, I learned, different skills. I made connections and developed my own strengths through this journey. And so, as an international student and being away from home, you learn to, to use the resources that are available to you and move forward. So then, 9 years were up. I came back to the US and I was faced with the challenge of how do I now get into the industry? How do I now find a job as an engineer almost a decade after graduating? And how do I convince an employer that they can hire me, 10 years later, versus hiring someone that is just getting out of college because, both of us don't have, engineering experience. So it was not only that, but, the fact that during a decade in our field, there are significant changes in technology, in software, in scientific breakthroughs. And so it was a very, tough challenge to be able to, to convince an employer to give me an opportunity to work. And so after that career gap, and here I want to make a distinction between a late entry versus a relaunch. So when you are relaunching a career, it means that you have a career, you have been working in the industry, and you take a break, whether it is to have a child, to take care of older parents, due to, circumstances, related to immigration or moving to a different country, etc. And then you are relaunching. And so, you have access to that previous experience that you had and the previous network and the people, the industry connections. Whereas for a late entry, it means you finish college and then you have a gap in between, finishing your education and beginning, your work, your employment. And so for me, I was a late entrant in which I hadn't worked in the industry and I was, trying to figure out how to get into the industry almost 10 years later. Luckily, when I was here in Rhode Island, I came across a biotechnology program that was just starting out at a community college. And for those of you who might not know, a community college is a college that offers certificate programs and maybe like 2-year degrees, but people, they usually transfer for them from these colleges into other universities to do like a 4-year program. So I said, and there was a grant through the state to take the first class for free. So I said, I got nothing to lose, and I joined the class. I also joined a virtual mentoring program, and this was a program conducted through Mentornet, where they paired me with someone that was already, a working professional, so that they could guide me through, my challenges and the decisions that I was making. And it's very interesting. I'm still in contact with my mentor about 14, 15 years later, and she has kind of seen the progression, of my career throughout. So it's very rewarding. So through this program at CCRI, the Community College of Rhode Island, I took a couple of classes. I didn't complete the entire biotechnology program, but that was enough to get a temporary job at a local biopharmaceutical. And, these are, an example of the bioreactors that I was working with, and I was literally cleaning them. I didn't, throughout all these challenges, I never felt that a job was beneath me, and I was willing to do whatever it took. And so even though this opportunity was, within the manufacturing as a very starting, level, I took it, in a stride. I actually met other people who also had, master's degree and, many years of experience in a different industry, and they were trying to get into biopharmaceuticals and biotech. And so they were willing to do whatever it took. And so literally we spent, the day just cleaning the reactors and, wiping all the surfaces, sterilizing, etc. One of the things that occurred through this temporary job is that I had the opportunity to get training, additional training through the company that I was working with, and to build industry connections, which came in handy later on in my career. So I landed my first real job after that. And I want to point out here that it was not, I would say, out of my own merit, but through a friend of a friend who was willing to submit my resume and put it in front of the hiring manager and say, I can vouch for this person. And, I've been told this is a very important part because, especially now in a very competitive, times that we live in where, everyone is submitting their resumes and you are up against, hundreds, if not thousands of applicants. It is important to have connections and to have someone to put in a good word for you. And so this person, shared my resume with the hiring manager. And I remember sitting in the room with the interviewer, and he asked me, so you're working in biotech, but you want to join our company, which is pharmaceutical. Tell me why I should give you an opportunity. And I was, honest. I said, I haven't really worked, in my education. This is, I'm trying to get my foot in the door. I work really, really hard. Please give me an opportunity. And they did. And so I started off in the lab as an analytical chemist. I worked in the lab, and from there, I progressed into, managing the inventory that was coming in and the raw materials. I reviewed analytical data, and I was lucky enough to work at a small company where you could wear many hats. And so I always gave 200% and was willing to get my hands, whatever, department needed help, I was there to assist. And this really, helped me in my career. Another thing that helped was to have found a coach and a sponsor within the company. And I don't think we have, time to go into the distinction, but please look it up. So I was, lucky enough to have someone, coaching me and teaching me about the industry and about the different paths within, pharma, and vouching for my career progression within the company. During that time, I also pursued some professional certification in project management. I really was just basically looking at everything that I could do to make up for the years that I hadn't worked. I was looking at my colleagues who were now, director level, leading companies, etc. And here I was just starting out, but that, I didn't let that deter me. And I also joined professional organizations, and those are great because they have educational events. I didn't at the time have the financial means to pay for membership for those organizations. And so what I did is I volunteered, and by volunteering, I was able to attend. And so this, proved very helpful. And also mentoring. I decided that, I always had, something to offer others. And so, from early on, I put myself out there and, show others the willingness to help them in whatever way I could. Now, this is a story about networking. And, I remember this distinctly, but I wanted to kind of illustrate, within a span of 6 years, what could happen. So the deer in the headlights is me walking into my first industry event, not knowing anyone. And someone asking me, have you, hi, how are you? Who are you? And I was like, just very straightforward, like, I'm new here. I've never been to one of these events. It was at a company where they were, speaking about an industry topic. So I was there to learn. And that person said, have you thought about consulting? And in my mind, consulting was for people who had been in the industry for longer. In my mind, the image of a consultant was, someone that has 30 years of experience. And he was like, no, not really. There are companies that need consultants at all levels. So, you might want to consider it. And so he put me in touch with someone else who I could ask questions about, how did consulting work versus, working full time for a client. I developed that relationship, and in parallel, my career continued to progress. I worked, at various companies, including Thermo Fisher Scientific. But throughout, in the back of my mind, I was thinking about consulting and how appealing that was to me, the dynamics of working with multiple clients and shifting from project to project. What wasn't appealing was the, sort of unsteady nature, right? Because consultants get paid when they are consulting on a project, but if the project ends, then you are not getting paid. And so this is where I approach that original person who had told me, if I had ever thought about consulting. He owned a consulting company. And I approached him one day and said, I have a proposition for you. I like to become a consultant, but I'm scared of not having an income when I'm not working. So what I would like to do is work on a full-time basis. And when I'm not consulting, I'll do whatever you need me to do for the company. I have many skills, I can do project management, I can make copies, filing, typing, whatever it is. And he was like, well, we've never done anything like that. Let me think about it. But about a couple of months later, he came back and said, we think we found where you would fit in the company. And he extended, to me the opportunity to come and join his consulting company on a full-time basis. So that was great. And just to illustrate, this is within, 6 years from that initial, just random meeting at the entrance of the event to, working full-time in the company. And here is another story that I wanted to share, and just to kind of illustrate. So in 2015, I attended a conference through the Harvard Business School. And in that conference, there was someone speaking about relaunchers and people who have career breaks. I approached the person who was speaking. She extended an opportunity to write an article about my career story. I was also involved in an organization called West. And at the time, I connected her with, West, and we had a panel event. Fast forward to 2018, and I got a message through LinkedIn, someone that had read the article that was published. And, she just wanted some help in guidance. She had also had a break in her career and was trying to figure out how to get into it. So I extended my help, reviewed her resume, and gave her, connected her with some people that I knew. And in 2019, she landed a position. And we've kind of, stayed in touch here, on and off. But in October, she got laid off. And, she reached out and, she let me know that she had gotten laid off. And I was like, well, what can I do? Who can I put you in touch with? And she said, well, I have an interest in, in Salesforce. Do you know anyone? I looked through my connections. I said, I know someone that I went to college with. We're not really, close at the time, but I can connect you with him. And so the information in the square is what she sent me because now starting in January 2021, she was able to secure a position, and it was through the person that I connected her with. He connected her to somebody else. And, based on that, she identified some opportunities in her area and was able to find a job. And so if I look at how, interconnected these things are, right, from that original conference in 2015, where I went and I attended, to the article that got published, her reading the article, her coming back, I connect her with someone. You never know, and so networking is key in developing your career. And then for me, the next step was, I was consulting, I was happy with what I was doing, but I had some challenges in the vision that I had for how I wanted to serve my clients. And I felt, somewhat constricted by doing this. And I found that I surrounded myself with visionaries, people that could see what I couldn't. And it was through that I was encouraged to start my own company. And here we go. So this is when the birth of Gather Global. I started off by thinking that I would transition from being a consultant through consulting companies to just consulting independently. But others, a very strong group of friends and visionaries, sort of saw the opportunity that, well, not only you can be an independent consultant, but maybe you can, have your own company and give this opportunity to other consultants. And so, one of the things that I find is, in, reaching out to people that you admire and surrounding yourself with people that, can encourage you and uplift you. One of the things that I wanted to do, when transitioning from working full-time as a consultant under other companies versus starting my own company is that I didn't, I had obviously some hesitations and reservations. So, it is important that you assess the risk. And, what I did is that I continued to consult through other companies while I was building my own company. And, in taking that, sort of calculated risk and building that safety net, not having all my eggs in one basket, it gave me more, courage to continue to pursue building my own company. Just a few things about the company itself. As Dr. Salam said, we specialize in supporting early stage virtual startup and small pharmaceuticals that have a drug candidate and are trying to take their drug candidate into clinical studies. If you think in terms of companies, like the major pharmaceuticals, they're very well established. They have, innumerable resources. But early stage companies not necessarily have that and don't necessarily need it. And so this is where we come in. We have the expertise of having worked with, many companies that are similar to them, and we can guide them as to exactly what it is they need. We can build a phase-appropriate, scalable quality system. We can help them oversee the contract manufacturing and contracted activities. We perform quality audits and provide them with regulatory support for their submissions with FDA, the EU, and other regulatory agencies. And we help them when it comes to privacy and data integrity compliance. So if you think in terms of, the phases of the clinical trial process, this is where Cadre Global operates. We basically go from the preclinical stage up to phase 2. So help the company transition from animal studies to human studies and everything that it takes to take a drug from the preclinical phase into phase 1. We understand, this is a very complex and time-sensitive journey. We understand that it's risk-based and relationship-driven because you are, as a virtual small company, you are working primarily with other people or other companies that are manufacturing your product and, conducting your trials. So you have to keep that phase appropriateness in mind and be able to guide them to, make the systems more robust as you move down the phases of the clinical study. And I just want to make sure that we have time. So here is the meat of the presentation. This is some of the lessons that I learned through my career. And this is part of, even though I don't like public speaking, this is why I put myself out there to share these lessons in the hopes that they will be helpful to others. And so I would say one of them is to identify your strengths. As an example, one of the things that I love to do it is to write. And so, I always thought, how can I use my writing skills to help, others, whether it was, professional organizations that I was involved with. I would volunteer to, if I attended an event, to write a recap of that event, or to write an article, or to collaborate with someone to write an article. So I was always kind of looking at, how can I use this one skill that I have to elevate, my career and to leverage, that skill. And another part is leveraging also, your experiences, right? So, there are the skills, but there is also the experiences that come with, being in a different country, knowing a different language, being able to communicate and relate to people of different cultures and have that diversity. cultivating meaningful relationships, I think, is very important. And this, couldn't be truer when it comes to networking and, staying in touch and being able to, whether it is to, help others or or connect others with someone else who can help them, just kind of always keep a positive attitude and an open mind towards that. Investing in financial literacy. I would say that this was key. As an example here, I have a graph of that was posted in 2015 in the Washington Post. It says that 38% of college graduates negotiate their first job offer. That means 62% of them take the first job offer as it is and don't negotiate it. So if you are offered, say, $50,000 a year, they just take that and move on. It is important to negotiate because that makes a big difference as you're moving, forward in your career. It's important to understand the, financial system of the country that you're living in. And if you're switching countries, what are the equivalents? As an international, student for myself, the system in Venezuela was very different to the system here in the US. And so, I had to, sort of learn, as an example, and I wrote it here, plan for retirement. In my country, I never even heard of the word retirement, or having to save for retirement. It was more like, okay, you work, you get old, and then that's it, you're with your family. Living in the US, maybe that wasn't the case, and so, learning about the country that you're in and sort of thinking, what does the future look like and how can I plan some contingencies for, as I get older, is important. And make peace with yourself about what could have been. I think this was key for me for many, many years after I, was able to come back to the US and work. Still, I had in my mind, and even working within pharma, I was like, well, how can I be an engineer? Is there a way that I can transfer into engineering? And, at one point, I realized that my career had already taken off. I was already on a path. And to switch into engineering would have kind of been taking a step back. And so I made the peace that even though I always wanted to be one, I didn't necessarily become an engineer, and so it's important that, as we have a vision within, what we think our career is going to look like, and, challenges occur, life happens, that, you sort of take a step back and recognize, that, what is the best, approach to the time that you're in. And not necessarily, sometimes we have to let go of those, dreams that we had and make new dreams. And another lesson, as I said, and I touched on this before, was, professional certifications. These are very helpful, to make yourself more marketable. There is a ton of certifications out there, as well as professional organizations. And what I like about these is that they always provide educational opportunities to stay current in the industry and to learn more about, new developments, languages. And this is both languages as, foreign languages, as well as computer languages. As an example, when I went to, to school, I knew MathCAD and MATLAB because those were the, engineering software that we were working with. Throughout my career, I learned how to do database management and programming and migration of data. I've learned different quality management systems, that are used in the pharmaceutical. So, even the computer languages can be very helpful, within your career. Defining success, I think this is important. What does success mean to you? And I think everyone's definition of success is different. And so it's important to spend some time thinking about that and defining it for yourself. Knowing your worth and don't be mollified. And here I have an anecdote to share. So this word mollified was a word that I wasn't familiar with. So I was at a time working at a company and I had taken on a lot of responsibility. I was, doing, like I had started at a certain level and I was already doing the work for a higher level. And so at one time I approached human resources and I said, I think you need to adjust my my salary. I think I'm underpaid for the work that I'm doing. And, I was able to negotiate, about $10,000, adjustment. Shortly after that, I went to a conference where, someone was speaking about market value, and this word mollified came about. And I realized that that's what had happened to me. Someone just offered me 10,000, and that seemed like, oh, okay, that's great. It's a large amount. But when I did the research, I was still being significantly underpaid. And so I went back and, I spoke with them and I said, 10,000 is not going to do it. I looked, at what, someone in my role should be making. And, I this is not competitive to where I am. And I negotiated a $15,000, addition to that. And so it's important to know your worth, to know what, what you're bringing to the table, and be able to articulate that and in your own interest. Another thing that is helpful is, remembering where you came from and what you've been through. When things got very challenging, I always remembered, hey, I came here, to the US at the age of 15 on my own. I didn't know English. I didn't have my parents or any family here. And, I survived. If I made it through that, I can make it through this. and so it's always good, to look back at your own story and build yourself up to push yourself forward. And then giving back, give back to the community, give back to those in need. For me, when I started Cadre Global, one of the things that was important was to build a component where we would give, some donations or charity throughout the year. And I wanted to be selective as to who the donations went to. And so for us, College Visions sort of matched, my story. Is an organization that focuses on helping first-generation college students make it through college, because a lot of them don't have the support system, don't know even how to apply for college because their parents didn't go to college. And so, we try to, give to this organization and to others, to make sure that we're giving back to the community. And that is the end. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Annie. I'm really impressed, especially having, after you had your break in your career, you were able to reinvent yourself, and in this, especially this is changing times, and even build your own company. So it's really admirable, and thank you really very much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Before moving to the next part of our webinar, I would like to remind our audience to please send their questions using all panelist option in the Q&A tab. So back to our discussion in it, when I read the title, I thought about those people who are actually following a straight, let's say a linear career path, and they are actually feeling safe and stable in their positions. So what's your advice in this? Is it better to stay in this linearity or to break it and try another way? Because, now we are living in a world that growth means being also uncomfortable. If we want to grow, we need to change. We need to challenge ourselves. So what's your comment in this?
I mean, I think it depends. For some people, it works to join a company and spend the next 30 years of their life there, and they're comfortable, with the stability that brings, and sort of the safety that you feel, being with, dedicated to a company. What is key though is to know that at the end of the day, somebody could have that conversation with you next week and say, sorry, we're cutting personnel, and it's our time to let you go. And then, especially if you have, spent 30 years in a company, you probably won't even know what to do, And so it's important, I think, to always see what is happening, in the industry, what it's, other opportunities that might be out there, to keep your skills sharp when it comes to looking for another job, even if you're not necessarily pursuing it, make sure that you can still interview and you know, maybe secure a position, just to kind of know. I went through, you know, personally through a point in which I looked for a job. I was trying to switch jobs at the time, and they, you know, I got into this great company. I got a job offer. The people seemed super nice, but it required that I would be commuting into Boston, you know, every day, long hours, train rides, you know, an hour and a half there, hour and a half back. And even though it seemed like a great opportunity, I had to take a step back and say, you know, what is my quality of life gonna look like? I'm gonna be, you know, out in the morning at 5:30, back at 8 p.m. When am I gonna see my children? When am I gonna cook? And I decided to, you know, it was best to turn it down.
Yeah, this is really great advice in self-awareness, self-discovery, always trying to reinvent ourselves even if we feel comfortable in our situations.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it really also captured my attention that you lived in many countries in the world. You know, maybe 3 languages or more. Not sure. So, how those languages, cultures, experiences influence your career path?
I think they have, you know, benefited my career. For one, I love to travel, and so, you know, part of what I did before COVID was travel all over the globe to do quality audits for some of my clients, you know, and I would visit the different manufacturing sites. And you know, it has given me the ability to relate to a lot of people, you know, of different cultures, and definitely see that perhaps the ways in the country that I'm currently living in are not necessarily the ways throughout, you know. And so when it comes to industry practices, you know, business practices, business relationships, they are different, you know, throughout the world. And so it's good to have that awareness, as well as be able to relate in different, you know, with people from different cultures. So
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Nick.
because you don't know where the opportunities are going to be, right? I mean, I'm assuming, you know, some of the, you know, people listening in might be international students, and, you know, they come from my country, they come to, you know, the Qatar Institute, study there, then they go to maybe another country, or, you know, or back to their home country. So, you know, that, you know, sort of cross-country, cross-culture experience is unique, and it builds a lot of resilience in people.
Yes. Yeah, and at the end of the day, also we adapt to the situation, and that's the key adaptation, and
Yeah.
whenever we live. Thank you, Enid. Let's move now to the next part of our webinar, and let's go over the audience questions. I think we have many. What was the core inspiration behind your personality and career?
You know, I would say that a lot of my inspiration came from watching my mom. You know, she was a single mother in the 70s, where it wasn't easy to be a single mother, you know, in Latin America. But she was very hard worker, and you know, she was organized because she was raising me on her own. And whenever I thought of, you know, things that were hard in my life, I thought about, well, you know, how was it in hers, and sacrifice that she made when she said, you know, here, go to the US. You know, I mean, I have now a 15-year-old daughter. And, you know, if she said, oh, you know, I'm going to go to another country and live there because I have a scholarship, I don't think so. You know, but my mom was able to, you know, be selfless in saying, you know, this is going to be an opportunity for you to better your life. And, you know, and so it has provided me a lot of the inspiration to keep going and keep pushing forward.
That's really admirable. Thank you. Let's move to the next question. When did you know that you wanted to have your own startup and build your company?
So it actually, it was not that I set up, I had like this idea of, I want to have my own company and this vision. It was more out of necessity. I was consulting for a company and, or, for clients through another company. And I felt sometimes limited to help my clients. So as an example, I had a client that said, I need you to, this week, go to Belgium and visit the facility and spend 2 weeks there. And sometimes I found that through the consulting companies, maybe they had like, oh well, there's going to be too many hours or this or that, and I felt like my hands were tied. Well, I'm like, if I'm willing and the client needs it, I should just be able to do it. So I was really invested in my clients and I wanted to provide better service. And that's what kind of led me to, maybe I can do this independently. Maybe I can just kind of branch out on my own and serve my clients directly. And it was through, other people sort of watching me saying, hey, maybe you can be independent, but you can also have your own consulting company and build a company from this, ideology of bringing value and partnering with your clients. And so this is, how it started.
Yeah, that's great. I imagine that sometimes there is not like a specific moment, but we just got the strength to go forward.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the next question, can we have this? Your story is inspiring and really highlights the value of networking and mentoring. Can you please elaborate more on Mentornet and how it works?
Yeah, thank you for that, because there's a lot to be said about, my experiences with networking. And, I was trying to really, not give too many details to keep it short, but I'm glad that it came across as to, the value of it. For Mentornet, I think the organization changed name. I would have to check. I was in touch with them maybe a couple of years ago when there was a talk at Brown University, which is local to me, and I knew that they were coming, and so I made the effort to go and meet with them. But it was basically a 6-month period in which they paired me with this professional, and we would have either email contact or at the time phone calls. I don't think we were video conferencing at that time. But, I would just reach out to her and said, this is what I'm thinking, like if I get an engineering job, how should I apply? What companies are, good to apply to? And, is there something else that I could be doing, like pursuing another, degree or certificate? And so it was a 6-month period, and in which I think they defined like a certain number of hours per week or per month. And that was that. But from there, I maintained that relationship with my mentor. And as I said, she has sort of seen from those emails to now that I have my own company. And, she's been a great champion, like saying, bravo, keep going. So.
Yeah, this is really interesting because I'm sure like many of us like is really interesting in this type of mentorship.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. The next question. Okay. What advice would you have for a fresh graduate looking for a job but doesn't have a lot of connections? How can you make yourself more marketable?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, this is a two-part question. On the first part of not having enough, or a lot of connections, I would say you want to put yourself out there. And that's why I kind of had that deer, in the headlights, because it's not easy. It doesn't come naturally for everyone to just go to an industry event and say, here I am, and you don't know anyone there. Now with COVID, it's even trickier because, a lot of things are virtual. But in a sense, it can also be easier, right? I mean, even for myself, giving this, talk, a lot of the encouragement was because it's virtual. So I've been less nervous because I don't have a room full of people looking at me. But, so, it might be helpful to see what, industry events are happening, in different conferences. Now that everything is virtual, it actually makes it more accessible for you to build connections. and not being afraid to reach out. I mean, LinkedIn is a great tool. I cannot count the number of times in which I have found people on LinkedIn and just reach out to them and be like, hey, I'm interested in your story. And actually, it's funny, Dr. Salam, from the publicity of this event, I had someone else contact me about speaking about my career somewhere else. And so, things just, evolve. In terms of making yourself more marketable, I think it's important to understand what is happening in the industry, right? What is happening in your specific field? Is there any new technology? Are there any new regulations? Is there any specific research, that it's, hot? And learning about it, and being an active learner and pursuing, that information so that you can speak about it, during an interview, for example, or or in while you're making connections. Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you, and very useful. And in terms also of public speaking, I mean, your story is really admirable, and I'm sure a lot of people, when they hear you, they feel really inspired and motivated.
Thank you.
Okay, so in the interest of time, we conclude today's webinar by thanking you in it. It was such inspiring, as I said, to hear all your lessons and actionable advices. And this is not only applicable for any researcher, but for any professional. Yeah, it was really amazing. And thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining today's webinar. If you have further questions, please feel free to contact us. I'd like also to extend my thanks to the fantastic team working behind the scenes, Omar and Reem and Dr. Adviti. Just one final thing, when you exit the webinar, we would appreciate you filling out the survey that will pop up on your screen. And if you have also any other topics that you would like us to cover in the next webinars, please also feel free to contact us. Have a great afternoon. Stay safe, stay well, and stay inspired. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.